Hey guys, how's it going? And welcome back. In today's video, we're going to talk about everything you need to know about upgrading the RAM in your desktop PC or the laptop PC. So let's get started. Okay, so the first thing you need to know is the processor that's in your computer. So for an example, my HP computer, which I've turned on over beside me, has an 11th generation iCore 3. It's an 1125 G4 at 2 gigahertz. Now, you need to search out the processor exactly like that. You don't have to put in all that Intel ARC garbage or anything because it already knows 11th gen is definitely Intel anyways, but you can put in the word Intel if you want. But search that on Google for the specs of the processor because that's going to tell you how much RAM it can actually address, 16 gig, 32, 64, 128, 256, and so on, for the amount of RAM it can actually address, okay? It'll also tell you that more information beyond that. It's actually going to give you the fact that yes, it's a 2 gigahertz processor, but in this case, it's also a quad core. It's also going to tell you the turbo frequency overclock, so how much faster it can go on a spike, okay? So it can access more speed if a program demands it. So it's going to tell you how much that maximum is going to be. So when you choose your RAM now you'll know exactly how much RAM you can jam into the processor, okay? But there are going to be some variables when it comes to laptops, okay, that are kind of really sneaky. But let's get to the desktops first, okay? Same thing applies with desktops. Now with desktops, you can change out your processors, especially on generic systems. They can support AMD or Intel chips, so on, right? And they'll support certain models of chips in a range of both Intel and AMD's. And you'll need to find out which one of those you have in your computer and see where you want to go from there, because each chip for its specifications will also only be able to address a certain amount of RAM. Now, your motherboard could also be a limitation on you if you have 2 slots versus 4 slots, okay? It could give you some limitations which could hinder you, so even if your processor could use more RAM, if your motherboard doesn't have enough slots to get the size of RAM required to maximize you, if that's what you want to do, you may want to consider a different motherboard. Okay, that can happen, right? Generic systems, I love them in towers and desktops. Call it a desktop anyway nowadays. I love the generic systems because it's kind of like you build it yourself or you buy one that's already pre-built for you. I generally deal with MDG for my PC computers because I can put them on a monthly payment plan. It's inexpensive for monthly payments for me. I love dealing with that company. As far as PCs go, I wish they carried Macs because then I'd be buying Macs too from them as needed. But yeah, sometimes you just go right to Apple anyway, right? But there are rent-to-own places that do sell Macs, but don't ever buy from them anyways. They'll charge you like 8 times what it retails for a new deck to the nines. You know what I mean? And you're going to get nothing but a base level system from a rent-to-own place. And yeah, it's not worth the money. But anyways, continuing on. So currently my computer, I already know, can max out at 64 gigabytes of RAM. I've got 16 in it. Now, depending on the computer and the power horse of that processor, kind of depends on how much RAM you really want to invest into that computer, because you don't need a boat can load of RAM if all you're doing is surfing the internet, watching videos, doing email, doing some typing, maybe do some webcam stuff with Zoom or whatever. You're doing the basics. And if that's all you're doing, even with Windows 11, 16 gigs for now is fine. If you're going to start getting into any kind of games, 16 is going to be okay for now, at least with Minecraft. Unless you're playing the much higher leveled versions of Minecraft. But the basic Minecraft, yeah, you're chewing up about 12 gigs total RAM between your OS, the video power that it's going to want to chew up, etc. You're up to 12 gigs in not even a half an hour. I mean, it's just ridiculous. It's a RAM hog. But then again, so are your browsers, right? This is another reason why 8 gigs even on a PC is not enough, because 11 wants 8 gigs to itself. Do you want to really run everything off swap? Because even though it's not a big performance hit, it's still a performance hit regardless. and it is eating away at your SSD because it's writing information like mad, and you're only allowed so many terabytes of written data on an SSD before it can fail. Okay, now some SSDs can go 3, 4, 5 times beyond the manufacturer's specs, but majority of the time, yeah, when you've reached the limit, you're done. It's history. So you want to try and avoid swap as much as you can, whether it's a Mac or a PC. So the more RAM, the merrier, okay? Keeping you away from swap as much as you can. Now, even on a computer like my little HP, it'll play Far Cry 1. It kind of sort of plays Far Cry 2. It definitely plays Return to Castle Wolfenstein. It plays a lot of the older Need for Speed games just fine. And that's okay. I mean, it can do some gaming. It can do some video editing just fine at 1080p. Not a big deal, you know. It's going to be a lot slower export time and probably slower for your editing than a high performance machine, but it has that capability. And if you're going to try video editing with an $800 computer from HP like this thing, yeah, you're going to definitely want at least 32 gigs of RAM in that machine. Especially when you're talking video editing software, because they tend to be pretty big RAM hogs, okay? But anyhow, so you got to know this stuff. Now, the speed of the RAM is also an important issue as well. But where the speed issue of the RAM comes in is you don't want to be slower than your base clock frequency of your processor, okay? You want to be faster, okay? And the fastest RAM you can get your hands on that'll work with your computer, the better it's going to be. Now, HP thought ahead of the game. They figured, okay, well, we jammed in a 2 gigahertz processor. Now, 2 gigahertz is 2,000 megahertz, okay? They put in DDR4 3200 megahertz RAM, which is 3.2 gigahertz, okay? Every 1,000 megahertz is 1 gigahertz. So we have 3.2 gigahertz RAM with a 2 gigahertz processor, okay? Regardless how many cores it has, okay? That's what we've got. Now, the RAM is faster than the base clock. That's entirely fine. We don't want to be slower, okay? We want to be faster. That's very important. And not all companies think outside the box like HP did on this one, okay? So I'm really happy with HP on this. They did great. Now, the turbo frequency, of course, is the other concern, okay? But is it really? Well, you know, let's say the turbo frequency is 3.7, okay? Because I think that's what my turbo frequency is, if I remember. But anyways, 3200 gigahertz RAM, if I'm in the turbo mode, which takes a pretty raunchy program to do that, and at that speed, okay, that would mean that my RAM is 500 megahertz slower than my turbo mode. Does that affect me? Not really. 500 megahertz is not enough to really even notice, okay? And so 3200 megahertz RAM is more than fine. And this, of course, is DDR4. Now, it does not matter if you mix brand names of RAM. It doesn't matter if one stick has 8 chips total and the other one has 4, okay? That doesn't matter. As long as the RAM speed is the same, that's the big thing that matters here, okay? Now, you can put an 8 and a 4, you know, whatever. Okay, you can do combination of gigabytes in boards, okay? It's not a big issue. It's fine, okay? Brand name, like I said, I've got 2 matched sticks in here because I am kind of really OCD on this. But those 2 sticks also had come out of my Asus 17-inch gamer laptop, and HP had actually had an 8 gigabyte Micron technology 3200 megahertz chip in there anyway. Kind of interesting that the two companies use the same speed of chips and the same brand and the same size. So it's like, oh, I got 2 8s out of this because I'm upgrading my gamer laptop to 32 gig. Let's just throw the 2 8s in this because it's the same speed of RAM, same type of RAM. And who cares about brand name, even though it is the same brand. And perfect. It saved me buying RAM for this laptop. That saved me money. Awesome. Usually I don't get that kind of a deal. Usually I'm spending more money on more RAM because it's like, I don't have enough. So yeah, going faster in speed is fine. But you don't want to be slower, okay? You don't want to be right on the speed either, okay? Like, I would not consider using 24 megahertz RAM in my HP with a 2 gigahertz processor, because I know that 2 gigahertz processor can access over 3 gigahertz on the turbo, so I don't want to bottleneck the system that bad. But 3200 megahertz RAM, that's what came with it on a 2 gigahertz chip, so yeah, that works. And would I notice any performance lag at all? No, I wouldn't. You'd have to put it on a scope to notice any difference, okay, to measure the frequency difference when you're in turbo with that RAM. So, yeah, no big. But when you intermix RAM speeds in computers, this is a big no-no. You get random lockouts, like freeze-ups. You're going to get random restarts, random shutdowns. Windows updates will refuse to install. Hey, even just loading Windows back in will refuse to install. And the worst possible thing that can actually happen with intermixing RAM speeds is you could actually literally short out and cook your computer. It'll just do that, okay? That possibility exists. Though I have not seen that happen in modern day computers, okay, in the last 10, 15 years. It is a possibility that does still exist. Do you want to take your chances? Go right ahead. It's your money you're flushing down the toilet if you blow your computer. But most of what does generally happen are the freeze-ups, lockouts, blue screens of death, that sort of thing, okay? So don't ever intermix the speeds of your RAM, okay? They have to each chip be the same exact speed. They don't have to be the same gigabyte in size, and they don't have to be the same brand, but they must be the same speed of RAM. Now, as far as type goes, you cannot put DDR4 into a DDR3 slot or DDR3 into a DDR4 slot. It will not allow you. They are completely different notches of where those notches are placed on those RAM chips, whether you're running desktop RAM or laptop RAM, so you will not be able to go wrong there. Now, how do you know what RAM is in your computer? Well, pull out a stick and read the label. The PC number, okay, it'll say like PC2 would be DDR2, PC3, DDR3, PC4, DDR4. And then it'll have a dash and some numbers. Now, it could be 2400, it could be 1066, it could be 1666, it could be friggin' 3200, it could be 4000, whatever that number is, that's the megahertz, okay? So, but if you're still unsure about this, then just simply take out your RAM stick, take a look at it, and say, okay, well, this is a 4 gig stick. It's PC3 12800S. Now, that's kind of interesting. Well, 12800S, well, that's kind of defeats what you just said, wasn't it? Yeah, because the actual speed, you have to actually now look this number up, because it turns out the speed is actually 1600 megahertz. And it's like, but didn't you just say that the 4 numbers? Yeah, but the thing is, we got more than 4 numbers here, so that's where things can change a little bit on us. This is why we look up that 12800S with the PC3 dash and then that set of numbers. The letters at the end make no difference, or the rest of the numbers afterwards. It's the main numbers themselves, okay? But you look it up and you'll find out, yep, that's 1600 megahertz RAM. Okay, cool. We got that. I think this is DDR4. On DDR4, no, that's 12800. Where'd my DDR4 stick go? Oh, it's probably right here. Yeah, 8 gig. So we have Kingston 8 gig PC4-2400R. When we look up that, even if we add the R or not, that will come up and say that it is DDR4 2400 megahertz RAM. Sometimes RAM is actually marked DDR3 and then the frequency in megahertz, etc. But a lot of times it's not. Okay, so double check your numbers just to make sure you know what you got. Now, keep in mind, some manufacturers will use slower RAM than what your processor can actually access. So in size and everything, so can that thing access faster RAM? You need to find that out. So you need to look up your motherboard on your desktop, and you need to look up the processor that is currently installed on that motherboard to get all the information on all the RAM speeds that are available to you, and as well as those processors too. And you've got to look up the processor too as a separate independent item to find out what is the maximum size of RAM you can use. Speed, not a big deal. RAM size, though, for physical addressing of RAM, that's a big thing. Kind of like your Windows OS, too. You know, Windows, at one time, a lot of people used to talk about Windows back in the old days when it was more concentrated on, well, how much can a 32-bit operating system address for RAM versus 64-bit? Well, everybody pretty much nowadays, except for probably a few, are running 64-bit operating systems, which can access the most amount of RAM. Okay? So this was a thing back in the day too. So now back then it was about the processor, it was about the motherboard, it was about the version of Windows you ran, all of that, right? And it's kind of like, well, nowadays everybody's running either Windows 10 or Windows 11. So, and they're generally running all 64-bit architecture operating systems and boards. So yeah, we're looking at a whole different scenario nowadays than what we used to. Okay, so things are a little bit different. With laptops, though, sometimes that can be a little weird because some laptops only have one RAM slot, some have two. Okay, I've yet to see a laptop that I've had apart that could actually have more than two RAM slots, but I'm sure it's possible. I just haven't come across one yet, so if I haven't seen it, I can't verify it. But I have seen them with just one slot and two. I've seen one slot with nothing on the motherboard. I've seen one slot with RAM on the motherboard. And then, of course, you've got two slots. Okay? That I've definitely seen, and nothing on the motherboard ever with a two-slot one that I've come across. There's never been any motherboard RAM, just the two slots. So, but if you're totally not 100%, just call the manufacturer of the computer or the motherboard and find out from them, because they will give you everything you need to know. But they're going to want some information. Now, in the case of my little HP computer, they're going to want from you the product number and the serial number of the computer to tell you everything you need to know about that computer for your maximum SSD in there, what kind of PCI slot it has for that, whether it's an Express 3, Express 4. Yes, you can use Express 4 and an Express 3 slot. We'll talk about all that stuff in another video. But they're also going to tell you your main key focus here is our RAM upgrade. How much will this laptop max? Because if you look at my laptop here, okay, now this is a 14-inch. HP has about 5 different ones that look all exactly identical from each other, except that only 1 or 2 of them has a fingerprint ID scanner here. The others do not. Some of them have no ID scanner and no backlit keyboard. Some of them have no ID scanner and they have a backlit keyboard. This just has the scanner, no backlit. I wish it had a backlit on it, but it unfortunately does not. So it kind of sucks for sitting in dark areas and trying to type when you can't even see the bloody keys. It's about the only real disappointment to me on this one. But so I have to have a light on or plug a little lamp into my USB port and I'll be fine. Okay, but when it comes to that, they have several models, and Lenovo does the same thing. Okay, other companies do the same thing. It's the same chassis, same screen, same everything, just different internal guts. So they need to know your product number and your serial number to tell you how much RAM that thing can take and at what speeds, what type of RAM it actually is that's in there if you haven't pulled the cover already. Most modern day machines, as far as modern day machines go, I haven't looked at them all, but they still may be making PC laptops that have hatches, okay? Entirely possible. Would not doubt it whatsoever. I love laptops that have the hatches instead of pulling the whole back cover, because it's like one hatch is for my RAM area, the other hatch is for my drive area. Fantastic. So little hassle. Undo some screws, pop a clip, pop off the whole plate, you're good to go. This sucker, that's a whole other ball game. And every HP laptop, at least, that has this exact look on the bottom will have the same configuration of screws as far as where they're located. You'll have 2 down here, you'll have 2 here, okay? You're going to have at least a minimum of 1 or 2 down here. I think this one has 1 at the bottom, I think. Definitely got 4 across here. And they're different length screws too. Keep that in mind. So these are your shortest little suckers here at the front. These are a bit longer. And these have a couple different sizes where I think one or two of them are going to be the same length as this, but the other ones are different. So you're going to have to arrange them in the right order. But you got to pull these rubbers off very carefully and very slowly. Don't just go rip, because you could end up leaving adhesive behind, which you don't want to do. And then you'll have to go buy some adhesive tape. And the only stuff that I know that you can actually get hassle-free locally would be, in my case, because I'm in Canada, I go to Canadian Tire and I can get this double-sided Scotch tape. It's already, you don't have to peel any backing off, but it's the really micro-thin stuff, which is what this is. And you'd have to lay down a new slice, lay down your thing, and trim the excess after, okay, to replace that with. But I've had these off about 3 or 4 times now, and they're still okay. You just got to be slow and careful about it. Popping the cover off is pretty interesting on that computer. Popping covers off on all laptops can be very interesting and very nerve-wracking because you don't want to break any clips. You don't want to push the spudger tool in too far because you break something, yeah, game over. We don't want to break connectors off the motherboard or anything. So you got to be very careful taking apart PC laptops. These are not Macs where you just take out a bunch of screws and dump the bottom lid on the table. I mean, it's just not that simple on PC laptops, okay? Macs used to be bad like that at one time, but ever since they went with all aluminum bodies, it's been fantastic with Macs. But we also can't upgrade Macs anymore either since late 2015. That's when they kiboshed the whole RAM and SSD thing on us, and that kind of really sucks. But at least in iMacs, they still let us upgrade RAM, and you peel the screen off if you want to upgrade the drive, at least on a 27-inch. On a 21.5, that could have upgradability. Apple says no. Every Mac would say either yes or no to that. If it was a yes, they will definitely tell you got to gut the whole thing just to get at the RAM slots. And some of the older Macs and even some of the newer iMacs that are Intel machines, they have internal NVMe SSD slots, right? But you got to take the whole motherboard out to get at the stupid thing. It's crazy. But either way, hey, if you want it done, you do it. But when it comes to your PCs, though, there's that stuff you need to know before you even upgrade the RAM. And the very first thing is, how much RAM would you like to put in? Well, you got to find out about your processor first, how much RAM it can handle. Then your board configuration is going to dictate the rest, because that processor can support 64 gigs of RAM, but if I only had one RAM slot and then I have motherboard RAM of say 4 or 8 gigs, now I'm extremely limited. I'm not getting my 64 gigs of RAM that way. I can't, right? Because it wouldn't be supported. But with 2 independent RAM slots, yeah, jam two 32s in there and I'm done. 2 simple, right? 2 16s, I'm done. 2 8s, I'm done, for whatever I want to do. But don't be buying laptops with only 8 gigs of RAM in them unless you fully intend on immediately upgrading the RAM to at least 16 gigs. Because like I said, Windows 11 wants 8 gigs of RAM now, and that is horrific. 16 gigs is your bare minimal that you want to be at for RAM in a PC computer, whether a laptop or desktop. And if you're a gamer, whether your laptop or desktop, bare minimum is 32 gigs of RAM, nothing less, okay? Otherwise, your computer is just going to be lagged out for gaming, okay? It's going to suck. I know, I've seen the difference myself between 16 and 32 just with Cyberpunk. I was like, wow, And Asus says that my computer can only go to 32 gigs. I still have to do more research on the chip, but I also have to do some board research with Asus because I think the board may have a restriction, but it may not, because some guy actually put a thing up on the specs of that same exact machine of mine, exactly the same model number, saying it can go to 64 gigs. So I got a little bit more investigating to do, because I wouldn't mind taking it to 64 gigs. If it can handle it, then yeah, I would definitely go and do it. But I don't want to just go spend the money and try it, and then I got to go through the hassle of, refund again, saying, So I'd rather be sure right away, and then I can just order it, and I'll get the fastest RAM too that I can slam in the sucker, to give me some more speed edge, because that thing can really honk, you know. But yeah, so hopefully this video helped you guys out. If you have any questions, feel free to ask. We'll talk about SSD drive stuff in the next video that I'm going to do, but I wanted to cover the RAM thing especially. Hopefully this helps a lot of people out there, so you got a better idea what you're doing. When you are working on laptops, though, you probably would want to make sure that your power is turned off and pull the connector for the battery if you choose to do that way. But you don't actually have to disconnect the battery in the laptop as long as you know it's powered off first. Triple check. As long as the power is off first, then yeah, you can upgrade your drive, you can upgrade your RAM. It hurts nothing. Okay? But if you're worried about it, then definitely disconnect the battery just as a safety for sure, especially if you're doing this for the first time. Definitely disconnect the battery, okay? Because anything can go weird. And with desktops, you just unplug them from the wall anyways. No harm, no foul there. And just do your thing and get in, get out, and do your thing. Because you're going to want to unplug it from the wall anyhow, depending on where you're working on your computer, right? So, and definitely unplug the power from your laptop as well. So, anyway, that's all I got for you. See ya.